This is just a natural hole in the ground, but when it fills up with water, it is a sight to behold. This is Thor's well. Thor's well is one of the most stunning places I have ever been, and it is an awesome rock formation where a natural cave coming in from the ocean had its roof collapse in, and that's how you get this hole here. When the water comes in from the ocean with enough force, usually during high tide, it pops out of the top of the well and then it drains back in and you get this beautiful water formation. This makes for stunning photos when you're looking at the well from the side and you see all the water just draining back into it. So let's dive right into the settings of this image and then we'll go over tips on how to get here. This image was taken with an f11 aperture and an ISO of 200. The focal length is 16 millimeters and the exposure time is 0.8 seconds. It was really bright that day, so capturing a 0.8 second exposure was reaching about the limit of what I could get with a neutral density filter already on and trying to capture the water flowing at the same time. So you'll definitely want a neutral density filter because I think without one, especially if you're trying to capture a sunset, it's going to be way too bright. However, if it's a cloudy day, you might be able to get away without a neutral density filter. So one thing you're definitely going to want to try out is just messing around with different exposures. And with a shorter exposure, you're going to capture more of the raw detail of just the crisp waves and the splashes that they make. However, with a longer exposure, you're going to get more of that smooth, silky, like water, majestic look. And that's what this is. So again, this was at a 0.8 second exposure. However, I would recommend trying out a longer exposure if the daylight and your camera settings and everything permits it. However, if you don't have a tripod, then you're gonna have to stick with those shorter exposures, but that's still gonna grab you some amazing photos regardless. So as far as gear goes, a tripod is a must because you're trying to capture long exposures. I did try capturing some of them handheld, and I did get away with a few images that were sharp enough to be able to pass by and not be super blurry because it was handheld, but I would say that most of the images I took handheld were blurry, so it's really hard to capture this, especially when water is flying at you and so much is going on. So I would recommend having a tripod to make sure that you're steady. Even at just a 0.8 second exposure, it's really hard to do handheld. So keep in mind that you are right next to the open ocean, and this is a dangerous place for camera gear. Water is always bad, but salt water is especially bad for camera and all of your gear. So I bought this nifty little waterproof camera bag on Amazon, and it's really easy to use. You just slide your camera into the pouch here and then tighten the end here in order to secure this case around your lens. You zip the back up and you have this clear pouch here where you can actually see the back of your camera screen. I don't know if you can see it right there. You can see your camera screen so that you can use live view so you can actually take photos without having to look through the viewfinder. And then it has these two arm pouches so that you can hold your camera inside and still operate the buttons and hit the shutter and all of that while the camera itself is actually very protected from water. I would recommend not going during the peak of high tide because the whole area is going to get waterlogged and it's going to be very hard to get all of your photos without getting drenched or putting yourself in danger. On that note, for this photo, I went about 2 hours prior to the peak of high tide that day, which just happened to be around sunset, so it worked out well, and I was able to capture amazing photos, and there was plenty of water coming out of the well to capture stunning shots like this. So don't risk yourself during peak of high tide, especially if it's dangerous. Scope out the area first and try to see how much water is coming out and what the area is like before you go down and get close to the well. It also can be very windy out there, so a windbreaker or a waterproof jacket is definitely recommended because the wind gusts were up to about 25 miles per hour the day we were out there, so it can get pretty windy. Once you are done, a quick tip is to go rinse out your gear, especially something like your tripod that may have gotten wet, with water that's not salt water, because the salt water will rust screws or any exposed metal that's on your tripod. I'm saying this because I made the mistake of bringing my tripod out there. The feet got wet because a lot of water was coming in and I did not rinse it out, and a few days later I could already tell everything was starting to get salty in there and the screws eventually did rust over. So don't let that happen to you. Learn from my mistakes. Now let's go over some quick tips for getting here. This spot is about just shy of 3 hours away from Portland, Oregon. If you punch it into Google Maps, that's what it'll tell you. However, I would recommend driving down Highway 101, which goes along the Oregon coastline, to get a very scenic view of everything that's along the coastline, because it's just so stunning everywhere you go. So once you're driving down along the highway, you'll get to a parking area for Cook's Chasm, and that's where you're going to park to get to Thor as well. On the right hand side of the parking lot, there's a small trail that leads down to the coastline area. It's very rocky and is not paved or anything at all, but that's where it's going to lead you to, and then you have to walk along that rocky terrain in order to get to Thor as well. I do recommend going during sunset because you get that very picturesque moment of the sun setting behind the horizon as opposed to it rising behind you for sunrise. However, definitely coming to the well during a point in which it's closer to high tide is a must, because if you come during low tide, there's actually no water coming out of the well at all, and you can actually see the bottom of the well, and there's very little ocean water that's going to be flowing in and out of that, so it's very anticlimactic. If you go during low tide, all you're going to see is a hole in the ground. That's literally it. So that's it for Thor's Well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want more information on Thor's Well, how to find it, or things to do in the area, check out my other video, how to find Thor's Well and explore the Pacific Northwest. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button and hit subscribe to see more videos like this. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I will see you guys in the next one.